Good evening and welcome to the weeknight. I'm Michael Steele with Alicia Menendez and Simone Sanders Townsend. Tonight, we are focused on the breaking news of the hour. Donald Trump has fired Pam Bondi. In just a moment, we'll get reaction from House Oversight Ranking Member Robert Garcia and whether he still wants Bondi to testify before the committee.
We'll also hear from Mark Elias and discuss the brand new lawsuit he's filed against the Trump administration over the president's mail-in voting executive order.
And later, the damning fallout from the president's speech on Iran and the stunning admission he made that the U.S. can't afford Medicare and Medicaid because we have to fund a war. We begin tonight, though, with that breaking news. Donald Trump has finally fired his embattled Attorney General Pam Bondi. This is after months of speculation. Trump posted a career update for Bondi this afternoon, saying she will transition to a, quote, important new job in the private sector. But can we just be for real for a second? Trump has been very frustrated that Bondi failed to successfully prosecute his perceived enemies. And a White House official tells MSNOW that many people close to Trump have pushed for her ouster in recent months. Oh, and we can't forget, parts of the MAGA base turned on Bondi just last year over her lies about the Epstein files.
This is something Donald Trump has talked about. The DOJ may be releasing the list of Jeffrey Epstein's clients. Will that really happen?
It's sitting on my desk right now to review. That's been a directive by President Trump. I'm reviewing that.
Just a week later, a group of right-wing influencers left the White House carrying Department of Justice binders labeled, quote, the Epstein files phase 1. You see them right there. Well, there was never a phase 2. And by last summer, the Department of Justice said case closed and that there was never a client list, despite Bondi's claim that it was sitting on her desk. Now, when it comes to Bondi's replacement, Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche will serve as acting Attorney General. And 3 sources tell MSNOW Trump's head of the Environmental Protection Agency, Lee Zeldin, is on the short list to eventually replace Bondi full-time. But don't think he's somehow less extreme. As a House member, Zeldin fanned the flames of Trump's big lie and refused to certify President Biden's 2020 election victory.
Yeah, as they like to say on the street, she gone. She gone.
Well, and I mean, and to be clear, the problem was the performance, and the lack of performance was being unable to execute on his retribution agenda, the same agenda that the chief of staff told us, well, it really wasn't going to be a feature of his presidency, just a little sliver. Well, it is not a bug. It is, in fact, a feature. And Pam Bondi is gone because, in Trump's eyes, she couldn't do it effectively.
But the performance problem wasn't hers. The performance problem were the lawyers in the department. Folks, let's be clear here. Yes, the FBI can investigate the hell out of anything and everything, right? But when it gets to actually going into a courtroom and standing in front of a judge and a jury with evidence that can lead to a conviction, despite what Donald Trump wants, what he demands, the law still remains the law in the courtroom. You cannot, those lawyers working inside that department just can't go make up stuff, go in front of a judge. We've already seen what happens when they've done that. And so the failure here, if he thinks he's going to get a different result with Lee Zeldin, you are dumber than we think you are, because that's not happening. That's not how this system works unless you completely break the system down, Alicia, in such a way that the courts don't matter anymore.
And if you look at the other names on that list, we've talked about Zeldin, we've talked about Blanche. We're also hearing Jeanine Pirro. We're hearing Alina Habba. As we've all talked about, Senator Mike Lee, it's hard to tell if that name is being floated because Republicans in the Senate would like the administration to see him out the door. None of them are actually a U-turn from this current leadership.
Right.
No, and they won't be, because Donald Trump, as I believe our colleague Eugene Daniels said earlier, Donald Trump is actually now the head of the Justice Department, which is hard to believe, but that is the world in which Donald Trump has us living in. And the moment people understand that, then I think they can wrap their heads around the rest of what's going on. My last point here, when are the incompetent men going to lose their jobs? Pete Hegseth, hello. RFK Jr., greetings. Kristi Noem and Pam Bondi are gone. Pete Hegseth is wholly unqualified, and I'm wondering if he's next. Well, we don't know. You know, someone who knows, I'm sure who has some thoughts about this, is Congressman Robert Garcia of California. He is the ranking member of the House Oversight Committee, and he joins us now.
Welcome, Congressman, to our conversation. Your take on the news today and the important question that Simone, put on the table. So she's still in the crosshairs to come before the committee, even though now she's technically, I guess, or soon will be a private citizen?
Well, first, I think this is obviously, it's welcome news. I mean, Pam Bondi has been orchestrating this White House cover-up. She's been completely incompetent, the most corrupt AG in the history of the United States. She has doxed survivors, released their information, has meddled in U.S. elections, and so I'm glad to see her go. And at the same time, she's set to appear before our committee in 2 weeks. And I want to remind the public and the president that the subpoena that we put in place, where all Democrats and some Republicans joined us, that subpoena doesn't say or specify whether she needs to be in her position currently to testify. It says we want to speak to Pam Bondi, whether she's the Attorney General or not. We've already checked with the lawyers. We've checked with the committee. She is set to be in front of the Oversight Committee in 2 weeks, and now she has an opportunity to come clean, tell the truth. Her boss isn't going to be Donald Trump anymore, and it's time to get to the bottom of why there's been this massive cover-up and why the other half of the files have yet to be released.
Congresswoman Nancy Mace is singing from your same songbook, but I'm curious whether or not you believe that Chairman Comer, there's going to be any effort to revisit the issuance of this subpoena.
So we're having those discussions. Look, actually, Chairman Comer, days after Pam Bondi had her fake hearing in front of Oversight, where she tried to set this strange hearing and briefing a couple of weeks ago, a few days after, Comer made it clear the subpoena still stands. He realizes that a subpoena that has already been issued can only be retracted by another vote of the Oversight Committee. He can't, on his own or with just Republicans, somehow retract that subpoena. And so it is in place. He would have to come before the full Oversight Committee made up of Democrats and Republicans, the same Republicans that voted for the subpoena, and ask for a repeal. That would be very hard to do. And quite frankly, if he moves forward with that, that is a huge cover-up. Why not hear from the AG or former AG on the Epstein files? We heard from former AG Bill Barr. There is precedent to hear from former attorneys general. And if Pam Bondi does not appear, I would be the first person to submit contempt charges against her, because she has right now in front of her a subpoena to appear on April 14th.
This is a very important distinction that you're making, and I think we should underscore, frankly, that the current Attorney General, Pam Bondi, herself said over the next month she is going to transition out. So she will be, this is from an ex-post today, over the next month, will be working tirelessly to transition the Office of Attorney General to what she calls the amazing Todd Blanche, and she goes on to talk about her private sector work. So for at least the next month, the month of April, Congressman, she will, in fact, be the Attorney General. So maybe some of these arguments that some of her allies are quietly making is a moot point. I want to read this to you from The Atlantic, because I think this goes to the point that the chairman was making in our little chit-chat at the top of the show. The president apparently believes that Bondi is failing to lock up his enemies because she isn't smart enough. He will eventually discover that Zeldin, or whoever replaces Bondi, also lacks the power to persuade juries to convict Trump enemies of imaginary crimes. And so the next Attorney General will eventually transition to a new job at the Shield of the Americas, or a farm somewhere upstate where they can run and play. Trump did demote Kristi Noem as a special envoy of Western Hemisphere Security Initiative called the Shield of Americas. What is your take on this? Because it feels like the job description at the Department of Justice has now changed into this impossible, frankly, way to serve the president, which is also, frankly, I would argue what he's asking people to do is illegal, but that might just be me.
I mean, that's right. Look, I mean, the president wants a Department of Justice that goes after his political enemies, anyone that's wronged him, complete retribution. And I think what Pam Bondi has learned, Todd Blanche have learned, is that the courts and juries aren't going to fall into whatever kind of line Donald Trump wants them to fall into. And I think this is really clear in what you just read there from The Atlantic, is that whoever he puts in, they're going to face the exact same problems that Pam Bondi faced. You have the court system in this country that in many ways is standing strong against Donald Trump. You have juries that will not take cases. You have all of these directives that Donald Trump is putting out there, executive orders, whether it's on voting or whether it's on immigration rights, that are being rejected. And Pam Bondi can't prosecute these cases because she's laughed out of court. And Donald Trump does not understand that. And so it doesn't really matter who's put in. Donald Trump is going to continue to be controlling the Department of Justice. But as Democrats and as Americans, we've got to be committed to the same exact fight, the same exact pushback that we gave Pam Bondi. We've got to do to whoever else is selected. Could be Todd Blanche. It could be a senator or two that's being mentioned. But at the end of the day, we've got to stand on justice, focus on the survivors, and focus on getting the truth and transparency.
So, Congressman, let's play the Russian roulette of who could sit in the chair to mix an idea there. That you've got Lee Zeldin, I guess, is the main individual that everyone seems to be talking about, or at least buzzing about in Washington. Certainly, a few names have popped up, Senator Mike Lee and a few others for a number of reasons. Zeldin, though, presents an interesting pick, should that come to pass, simply because of his sycophantic, lockstep, right up Trump's shadow in terms of the 2020 election, the election denying. You've got Politico noting from the 2020 election vote. Zeldin took to the House floor after the violent insurrection at the Capitol on January 6 to object to the certification of the 2020 presidential election results, citing what he called evidence-filled issues with the elections administration. There is no evidence of widespread fraud during the 2020 presidential election, and nor has Lee Zeldin produced 1 ounce, 1 inch, a centimeter of evidence that there was a fraud in the election. And yet he's now in a position to run this department. How will you dance with him, sir?
Well, I mean, first, he and Trump are actually very close. I mean, they're very good friends. Zeldin is a complete election denier. He'll do whatever Donald Trump wants him to do. Look, I hope that the Senate stands strong. It's been a shame to watch so many senators cave and vote for some of these nominees. I mean, give me a break. There should be 0 votes for whoever Donald Trump puts up, because at the end of the day, that person is going to be not held accountable by Donald Trump, and will do everything that he wants him to do, to go after enemies, to ruin the DOJ, to go after the courts. And so we've got to stand strong and continue to push back. And I would hope that there's some senators that realize that what we need is an independent AG, or someone that actually has respect in both chambers. And it ain't going to be Lee Zeldin, and it's certainly not going to be some of the other names like Gene Pirro and some of the others. I mean, these folks are loyal only to Donald Trump, not the Constitution.
They're loyal to Donald Trump, but now we're finding out that no matter how loyal you are, it is not loyal enough. I want to read this statement from Annie Farmer, who, of course, is one of the survivors of Jeffrey Epstein's abuse. This was her statement in reaction to the news today about the AG. She writes, "This is not about a single person. It is about a government and judicial system that has repeatedly failed Epstein survivors. Regardless of who holds power, survivors deserve accountability, transparency, protection from retaliation, and assurance that those who enabled Epstein, Maxwell, and others will be investigated and, if appropriate, prosecuted." In addition to the way that Pam Bondi has handled the release of the Epstein files, there's just been the sheer callousness with which she has treated these survivors, most notable, of course, at that congressional hearing where she couldn't even look at them. She couldn't speak to them. Yeah. I wonder today, have you spoken with survivors, and what does this moment mean to them?
I haven't. Actually, it's interesting you put up Annie. Annie and I communicated earlier today after the news was out. I think something that she has said in the statement and has said to me and others is obviously this is a moment that we're focused on Pam Bondi, but it's a lot bigger than that. It's about the corruption of the DOJ. It's about Pam Bondi and the way that she has treated the survivors and the way the DOJ has treated the survivors. Not only could she not look at them in that hearing, but I'm still disgusted by the way that Todd Blanche, the FBI, the DOJ have all actually handled the materials. These survivors in some cases have been doxxed. These survivors have been exposed. Intimate photographs have been released to the public. The names of survivors, which should have been redacted, were out in the public. Their families have been put in danger. And not once did Pam Bondi or Todd Blanche or anyone else invite the survivors in to meet with them, to discuss issues with them, to actually look them in the eye in the same hearing room. And I think the frustration that you hear from Annie and other survivors is also just the human decency. Where is the respect of these women who, by the way, are nonpartisan, who come from all ends of the political spectrum? Where's the respect to actually listen to their stories, to work with them, to actually get some justice? And I think that, unfortunately, Pam Bondi's legacy, in large part, is going to be the way she disrespected and treated these women.
Ranking member of the House Oversight Committee, Congressman Robert Garcia, thank you so much, sir, for being with us. In just a moment, we're going to continue this conversation with Mark Elias and discuss his lawsuit targeting Donald Trump's assault on mail-in voting. And later, breaking news out of the Pentagon as Pete Hegseth fires a top Army official while we are in the middle of a war. You're watching The Weeknight.
Now with tonight's breaking news, Donald Trump's unceremonious firing of Pam Bondi. The move comes just days after he tasked Bondi with a key role in his attack on mail-in voting. You guys are familiar with that, right? His executive order directed his now ex-attorney general to investigate anyone wrongfully distributing mail-in ballots. Now, we should know this order cannot be enforced as it is. And it's already facing 2 lawsuits, one from Democratic leaders and another filed in Massachusetts by a coalition of voting rights groups. Joining us now is Mark Elias, founder of Democracy Docket and chair of the Elias Law Group.
Mark, I am sure you have thoughts about Pam Bondi today. And it struck me, we are talking a lot about Pam Bondi in the context of how she did not how she frankly bungled the release of the Epstein files, the entire Epstein investigation. But I think there's another piece to this. It is her gutting and erosion and redirection, frankly, of the Civil Rights Division. And the modern day Civil Rights Division, prior to, this version of the Trump Justice Department, they were the backstop, especially after Shelby v. Holder when it comes to voting rights. And I think we have an example in this country. After Reconstruction, when the federal government retreated, the states did not enforce voting rights, did not enforce, the progress that had been made. They entrenched it even more. And frankly, given what Pam Bondi has done to this Justice Department when it comes to the Civil Rights Division, I think we're seeing that play out here as well.
Yeah, I think the legacy of Pam Bondi is going to begin with her politicization of the Department of Justice to go after Donald Trump's political opponents. So I think that's like top line, right? The fact that she was willing to open criminal investigations and pursue political investigations, it will be the biggest legacy. The second one, though, Simone, is what you just said. It's not going to be the Epstein files, as tragic and as terrible as what she's done has been. It's going to be her use of the Department of Justice, not just to gut enforcement of the civil rights laws, but to actually reverse them, to actually turn the Department of Justice for the first time under either Democratic or Republican presidents into a tool of the vote suppressors and the people who want to overturn minority voting rights. And that is a dark legacy that, unfortunately, like the first one, is going to be really hard to shake. I mean, it's going to be hard to unring the bell about the politicization of the Department of Justice. It is also going to be hard to unring the bell about all the damage that has been done by having an election denier, not just in the White House, but an election denier running the Department of Justice, willing to do anything to undermine the rule of law, the Constitution, and the voting rights of Americans.
Meanwhile, you have acting AG Todd Blanche at CPAC answering this question about ICE at polling places.
Why is there objection to sending ICE officers to polling places? Illegals can't vote. It doesn't make any sense.
I mean, Mark, to ask a rhetorical question, is the DOJ any safer in the hands of anyone whose name is currently on the president's shortlist?
No, in fact, I think it could get quite worse. I mean, the thing about Pam Bondi is she was of the election denier movement, but she also fashioned herself to be a prosecutor. This is the reason why some people early on, when she was first nominated, I think were taken in by her. I never was, but there were people who were, because they said, look, she had been an attorney general. There are a lot of people that could be put forward who are much worse, who are just straight up election deniers. And are just, are much more cold-blooded in their willingness to overturn the results of free and fair elections. And there are a lot of those names that are familiar. There are some of those names that would be less familiar to people. But just to answer Todd Blanche's question, the two people who were most famously gunned down and killed in the streets of Minneapolis were both U.S. citizens. The people who we see had their windows broken in their cars and dragged out and their seatbelts cut off, those were U.S. citizens. The people who were harassed and tear gassed for simply standing and holding up a cell phone to record what was happening, those were U.S. citizens. So why should U.S. citizens be worried about ICE at the polls? I can name dozens and hundreds and thousands of tragic incidents in which U.S. citizens were victimized. So those are just some of the reasons why they should be worried.
Mark, the challenge and the opportunity you have and have so far executed very well is to, with full throat and direction and focus, push back against a lot of the lies, a lot of the dis and misinformation that's being peddled by Trump and Bondi and others. And now there seems to be a new front that's about to open up, and that's regarding the 2020 census. Yeah, folks, the 2020 census. You have House Oversight Committee Chair Comer saying that the census miscalculated the vote. The basic count was miscounted grossly to the tune of costing the Republicans anywhere from 4 to 5 congressional seats, Comer told Real America's Voice. He said California, New York, and Rhode Island should have lost more seats than they did, and Florida and Texas should have gained more. He said the results hurt the Republican Party's chances in the 2022 midterms. In a letter to the Census Bureau director in 24, Comer cited reports from the Heritage Foundation, echoing or manufacturing, my word, these claims. What's your take on this new front that they're trying to open? Let's go back and just say, hey, the census was fraudulent before we even got to the 2024 election. At the same time, the 20 election was fraudulent.
Yeah, look, I mean, we're already litigating against Republicans over the 2020 census and their attacks on it, and we're prepared to do so when we get to 2030. Look, this is just the Republican Party right now has everything going for them except for voters, right? The voters are against them, the citizens are against them, the polls are against them. People don't want them in office, but they control the levers of power. They control the House, they control the Senate, and they control the executive branch, and they control a lot of governors' races. In one day, I found myself filing a lawsuit minutes after Ron DeSantis signed a bill in Florida imposing a state SAVE Act, and later that day suing the President of the United States in federal district court in Washington, D.C. in that Democratic Party lawsuit that you mentioned, challenging the new executive order. And, those were just the bookends of my day. I mean, we're litigating more than close to 90 cases right now in 45 states, and that number is growing because Republicans are attacking every aspect. There's no aspect of voting or the elections or the 2020 election that they are not attacking. This is a full-out assault on democracy, and people need to be paying attention to that.
People hear these legal fights, Mark, and I think it's easy for folks to believe it's abstract, but this is affecting literally what people could do this summer when they have primaries coming up. I mean, heck, next month, what happens is November. This affects whether we are expanding the opportunity for people to participate in our political process or if we're constricting it. And it's gonna meet you in your community whether you wake up to it or not.
Yeah, and that's why I'm really glad that you started with the Todd Blanche quote or the clip, because the fact is, for a lot of people watching this, you think this is not your problem. Like, you're abstractly worried about it, but it's not your problem. They are coming for you. They are coming to disenfranchise you. This executive order by the President of the United States would have the Department of Homeland Security develop a list of who they believe are eligible to vote. And those lists would then be sent to the states, and those would be the only people allowed to cast ballots by mail. And if you think that because you were born in the United States, you have nothing to worry about, who did Donald Trump make his political career on? Who did he make his career on saying was not born in the United States? Barack Obama. What did Barack Obama prove that he was born in the United States? He produced a birth certificate. Birth certificate from the state of Hawaii. The state of Hawaii said this is a birth certificate, shows he was born in the United States. Did that stop Donald Trump? Did that stop the lies? Did that stop the attacks? No, it didn't. And it's not going to stop it when they come for you, and they come for me, and they come for Simone, and they come for Alicia, and they come for Michael. The fact is they don't want people who are going to vote Democratic to be able to vote. And it does not matter whether you are the former president of the United States, born in Hawaii, where it was publicized, and there's no doubt, or you're Mark Elias, born to a much more obscure family and much more obscure circumstances in a hospital in New York City. Like, they're going to come for all of us. And what Todd Blanche was saying about why do you care, I come back to it, because if you are a U.S., if you are a nurse treating veterans in a veterans hospital, you were killed on the streets of Minneapolis by ICE. If you were a woman who was with the family dog in the backseat and stuffed animals in the glove compartment, trying to simply get out of the way of ICE, you were killed in the streets of Minneapolis. And so the idea, if you're watching this right now thinking, well, this is maybe going to affect some naturalized citizens, or this is going to affect some people, you know, in the Deep South, this is going to affect all of us.